What percentage is cancer versus diabetes and all the other things?
So, I mean, when I first started, I saw a lot with like metabolic health and chronic illness, mold, toxicity, Lyme. And then as I've progressed into my career, probably now like 80 to 90% of my patients have cancer, either
Wow.
pre-diet or have cancer diagnosis or in remission and wanting to maintain remission. And then I see you're preventing cancer by treating all of your chronic illnesses. And so a spectrum, it's not necessarily like, oh, do you just treat cancer? It's like, well, if you have mold toxicity, if you have chronic fatigue, thyroid issues, gut issues, all of that in its sense is preventing cancer. So it's like prevent cancer, treating, helping people, thrive through a cancer diagnosis and get into remission, and then
Yeah.
ensuring that cancer doesn't come back and making sure we're assessing markers to make sure you're not creating an environment where cancer would want to come back.
Big picture here, obviously diabetes, cancer, mold, fungus, like you said, it's all related. Do you want to explain more about how that's all related?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you go through just even the basics of what Dr. Seyfried talks about, is cancer is a metabolic disease.
Use the word metabolic.
Yep,
Can we
I'll
break
define.
that down for a hot moment?
Yeah, I'm going to define it for you.
Great.
So there's a difference. So in a conventional setting, we think of the somatic theory. What somatic theory is that you're handed a bad set of genetics and essentially you rolled the dice and you got cancer, or you got some chronic illness. Okay. And there's not a whole lot you could have done about it. Maybe if you changed your diet a little bit, you'll feel better, but ultimately that was your destiny to get this in the first place because of your genetics. The metabolic component looks at it differently. So it all is centered really around this organelle, or it's a part of your cells called the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of your cells. It allows you to feel energy. It allows you, or every movement you do, to really function and thrive. And so what ends up happening in the metabolic approach, or understanding that theory or aspect, is that the mitochondria gets bogged down. So it gets damaged. And you see patients, this can happen because of environmental toxins. So chemicals, mold, metals. You can see it from diet. So heavy use of sugars, high fructose corn syrup, seed oils, inflammation, all of that. You can see it from dental infections. You can see it from gut infections. You can see it from high stress levels or poor sleep habits. All of this plays a role. So it doesn't just isolate out genetics. Obviously, genetics can play some of a role, but really it's about 10% of what ends up actually really happening. Most of it, or 90% of it, is really your environment, what you're doing or putting into your body. And so that metabolic approach has now looked at a patient as a whole person, because not one person got to a diagnosis the same way.
The following information is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to diagnose, treat, prevent, cure, or prescribe for any medical or psychological conditions. Seek out the opinion of a qualified healthcare professional if you need medical attention. The guests of this show provide their own opinions and may not represent the values or beliefs of Living Waters Wellness Center or Whole Body Detox Show. And welcome everyone to today's Whole Body Detox Show. I'm David DeHaas from Living Waters Wellness Center. Living Waters Wellness Center was formed after we discovered how to heal my body from multiple symptoms, including allergies, asthma, chronic fatigue, back pain, psoriasis, acne, hives, yeast infections, and finally cancer, and I did it all naturally. After 20 years of trying numerous different treatments, medical treatments, cleanses, iridology, muscle therapy, acupuncture, acupressure, homeopathy, naturopathy, those experiences led us to discover that recipe that led to become known as the 4 Natural Laws of Healing. Combining multiple natural healing modalities to fully detox and cleanse the body and allowing the body to take the perfect nutrition to fully restore the body back to its innate health. This became known as a 10-day healing retreat. We've helped thousands of people just like you get their health restored so they can live their life to the fullest. And if you want to learn how you can get your body back to living your best life, go to livingwaterscleanse.com, click on that link, 4 Natural Laws of Healing, and watch the video. Or call the office at 208-3789-911. Good morning, everyone. David DeHaas with Living Waters Wellness Center, where miracles begin by healing from within. Today, I'm very, very privileged, in my opinion, to meet and interview Alicia Hickson, founder of Rama Health. And this interview came to me via another client who's went through our 10-day healing retreat and has went out to Alicia's clinic out in Minnesota, right?
Yep.
In Minnesota. And she called me up. She says, David, you got to listen to these two people. And she mentioned your name. And so we've been trying to connect for a while. So welcome to the show, Alicia.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Tell the audience who you are, what you're about, how you got to where you're at, and let's begin there.
Yeah, my name is Alicia Hickson, and I'm a board certified physician assistant. I've been working in the integrative world for about 10 years. And so it kind of all began when I was in high school. My teacher's daughter was diagnosed with cancer, and I got involved in a pediatric oncology foundation and knew like the Lord just really put it on my heart to I wanted to go into cancer somehow. I didn't know what that exactly would would look like. But I kind of just kept searching, and she ended up passing away my senior year. And
Oh,
I quickly realized like I wanted to be in the cancer world, but I didn't know what that would look like because I'm a very like, I want to know why on everything. And in terms of a conventional setting, why could a 20-year-old pass away from cancer? It just didn't make sense to me because she was healthy, she was active, all of the picture perfect what you think. And so what was typically described on why you get cancer, how cancer functions, didn't make sense to me. And so then I just kind of was prayerful about it, went through first couple years of school afterwards, and I ended up at Bethel University in Minnesota. And one of my teachers' first day of teaching, she started talking about integrative medicine, and the whole class was on integrative medicine, more or less. Metabolic function, understanding biochemistry was like very heavy. And then she started giving us studies. And one of the studies was Dr. Thomas Seyfried and how the metabolic approach to cancer worked. And finally, it like clicked of like, okay, this makes more sense in terms of why somebody young, healthy could get cancer, because there's so much more beneath the surface that we may not recognize. And it's not just, oh, they just had a bad set of genetics and this is where we're at. And so I was just intrigued, and I talked to my teacher, and she was like, why don't you reach out to him? And I was like, what is he going to want to do with me? I was 18 years old at the time. And I reached out to him, and he pretty much just put me under his wing, gave me a ton of studies, research, things along those lines to, help me understand what he was studying, and then connected me to some of the best in the field and was like, you need to go get a medical degree of some kind so you can be seeing patients. And so I went on to PA school. So I didn't find this after PA school. I went to PA school to do this. And
wow.
when I was in PA school, it was really special because nobody really understood integrative medicine. So now I was trying to put my integrative brain to now see the opposite side of the conventional brain, where you normally hear a lot of people or like they found integrative after they were already very conventional. And so I walked through PA school being like, hey, but what about this? Like, love when people are like, oh, you can't ever reverse type 2 diabetes, it's managing it. And I was like, but I actually I had published studies at this time with my professor on reversing diabetes, reversing dementia. And I was like, but what about this study? And they're like, well, this is 10 years before its time. And I was like, well, as soon as I graduate, I'm going to start doing this because I'm not doing 10 years from now, because this is what can help people
He
now.
literally said that's 10 years from now.
He said anything that's in studies currently, he goes, it takes about 10 years for it to be integrated into a conventional setting, at least 10 years. And, this has been 10 years since I've written all of this stuff, and it's not a mainstream thing anymore yet. They're starting to be more open-minded 10 years later, but it's not what's widely accepted as a school of thought on how to address different chronic conditions in the conventional world.
How
So
dare you challenge the standard, my dear?
but it was fun because my professors, when they looked at the article and they're like, well, this is, hard to understand how this would work and whatever. And I was like, well, actually, I published this. So let's talk through it. And so it was just fun going through PA school doing that and challenging me too in my own beliefs. Because at that point, I was like, integrative is the way to go. And there's no means for a conventional setting. And the Lord changed my heart on that and was like, no, conventional medicine are great firefighters. There are components where we need that. And then integrative can be very helpful and be more of a role on more chronic illnesses. And then in the world of cancer, you can see, some patients do really well just in integrative. Some people do really well in conventional. I see that patients really thrive when you kind of combine the worlds together. And so you can do either one. And it's just understanding that not everybody is in the same place or comfortability with doing one versus the other. And so kind of bridges that gap. And it's really special to be able to watch patients succeed in that way.
What percentage is cancer versus diabetes and all the other things?
That I see. So I mean, when I first started, I saw a lot with like metabolic health and chronic illness, mold, toxicity, Lyme. And then as I've progressed into my career, probably now like 80 to 90% of my patients have cancer. Either
Wow.
pre-diet or can have cancer diagnosis or in remission. And wanting to maintain remission up. And then I see, still surplus because I always say, you're preventing cancer by treating all of your chronic illnesses. And so a spectrum, it's not necessarily like, oh, do you just treat cancer? It's like, well, if you have mold toxicity, if you have chronic fatigue, thyroid issues, gut issues, all of that in its sense is preventing cancer. So,
Yes, exactly. Spot on. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. Yes. Talking like language.
so it's like prevent cancer. People, thrive through a cancer diagnosis and get into remission, and then
Yeah.
ensuring that cancer doesn't come back and making sure we're assessing markers to make sure you're not creating an environment where cancer would want to come back.
Yeah.
And so this year in April, I actually opened up my own clinic to have it be more of a price-centered clinic where I, was able to really share faith that also is a huge part of what I do. But, and seeing how patients are able to thrive in that area and it kind of has now developed a lot into seeing patients with cancer and just chronic illnesses, or patients, they were sent to Mayo and they're like, we got nothing for you. And so then I have people that are actually referring patients to me here and at my clinic, and they're like, just see Alicia. I don't know, she came up with something for this patient, so maybe she got something for you here. So just looking at it differently and just thinking outside the box is all I do.
Yeah. Well, hallelujah. I hear you. I understand completely. Once they get sick enough, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously, so Siegfried set you on a path. You started studying all of his work. I've listened to several of his podcasts and so forth. So, big picture here, obviously, diabetes, cancer, mold, fungus, like you said, it's all related. Do you want to explain more about how that's all related?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you go through just even the basics of what Dr. Seafried talks about, is cancer is a metabolic disease. And so there's two different
So
theories.
hold on. You know what? Use the word metabolic.
Yep,
Can we
I'll define.
break that down for a hot moment?
Yeah, I'm going to define it for you.
Great.
So there's a difference. So in a conventional setting, we think of the somatic theory. What somatic theory is that you're handed a bad set of genetics and essentially you rolled the dice and you got cancer, or you got some chronic illness. Okay. And there's not a whole lot you could have done about it. Maybe if you changed your diet a little bit, you'll feel better, but ultimately that was your destiny to get this in the first place because of your genetics. The metabolic component looks at it differently. So it all is centered really around this organelle, or it's a part of your cells called the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of your cells. It allows you to feel energy. It allows you, or every movement you do, to really function and thrive. And so what ends up happening in the metabolic approach, or understanding that theory or aspect, is that the mitochondria gets bogged down. So it gets damaged. And you see patients, this can happen because of environmental toxins. So chemicals, mold, metals. You can see it from diet. So heavy use of sugars, high fructose corn syrup, seed oils, inflammation, all of that. You can see it from dental infections. You can see it from gut infections. You can see it from high stress levels or poor sleep habits. All of this plays a role. So it doesn't just isolate out genetics. Obviously, genetics can play some of a role, but really it's about 10% of what ends up actually really happening. Most of it, or 90% of it, is really your environment, or what you're doing or putting into your body. And so that metabolic approach has now looked at a patient as a whole person, because not one person got to a diagnosis the same way. So, for example, a person with cancer, that has breast cancer, one could have a dental infection that has been leaking inflammation and irritation down to the breast for 10 years. Another one could have had, emotional abuse and had, high levels of sugar intake, and their carbohydrates and insulin and A1C and all of that has been really high, which can encourage breast cancer to function in that space.
Can we pause a moment? I want to share a quick story I think would be great for the audience.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is going to tie in.
Yeah.
First of all, for those of you listening, I'm going to put show notes in the podcast. If you listen on the radio, you'll go to the podcast. And I just did a whole show on mitochondria, but I want you just pop something in my brain. Had a gal get this. Alicia, 2017 was told she had cancer, did chemo, radiation, body part taken out. 2019 repeat, new body part out. 2021 new body part out, more chemo and radiation. Last year spent $52,000 going through a naturopath, doing a bunch of things. All great stuff. Was told in July, you got stage 4, get your affairs in order. She's 62 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
And her friend was in here doing colon hydrotherapy and says, oh my gosh, you got to call my friend Lisa. You got to call her. You got to call her right now. So I said, okay. So I called her and I said, well, watch our video. If it makes sense, just give me a call. She did. 2 hours later. So I got to meet with you. Came through the process. And one of the things we do here is we take, and I know this ties in with some of the stuff you do, is I took her through what I call life journey emotion release. She'd been doing talk therapy for 20 years.
Yep.
So we get done and we walk out. She goes, damn it, no one's ever done that. What'd I do? And she goes, I've been doing talk therapy for 20 years. No one had me do what you did. And someone did something bad to her when she was 2 and on.
Mm-hmm.
And she thought, she had forgiven and so forth, but she hadn't fully forgiven as a young girl. So that process, she got to do that. And she goes, David, I feel 50 pounds lighter. And the tennis ball sized tumor, it's in my abdomen. When I came here, I can't feel it. It's poof, the frequency changed. I was like, oh my gosh, we got to put this on tape. No one will believe this. Mm-hmm. And yeah, no, it's pretty cool. And like you say, this emotional component is very, very big.
So huge. I mean, I have a patient that she had stage 4 cancer, given about 6 months to live. I don't know, this is probably 3 years ago now. And she came to me, she was doing chemo, doing all the things. And we did, started supporting her mitochondria, looking at her blood sugars and her diet and all of her lifestyles. But I asked her just some hard questions, and she had a lot of really traumatic things happening in her life. And I was like, before you worry about anything else, we need to get you in a safe space. We need to help your body heal. And I need you to start forgiving this person. Even doesn't feel right, but we have to find somebody that's going to walk you through this. And so we set her up with a therapist. And I do a lot of EMDR therapy. So I'm not
Awesome.
haven't done necessarily what you do, but I have a lot of patients that do EMDR. I
Yeah.
encourage everybody to do that.
Yeah.
And so she started that, and within 6 months, that June, so I saw her in November, that June, she had a clean scan. She stopped doing any type of chemo in July of that year, and now we're 2 years out, still no evidence of disease. And so they're like, we're not really sure what to do with you. And I was like, it's as much as you want to now maintain and make sure the mitochondria and everything are functioning well, but ultimately, your emotions, I always tell patients, if you are anxious, you're not forgiving, you're angry, whatever, I don't care what direction, conventional, non-conventional, you decide to go, it's going to be much more difficult for your body to fight cancer.
And you see that with diabetes, I'm sure, as well.
For sure, any chronic illness. I mean,
Sweetness
even
of
just
life. Yeah.
limbic system dysregulation, that's a huge thing. And so when people have like mold toxin illness and they're like having a hard time healing, it's like, well, what does your stress levels look like? What does your, past look like? Why is it that your body's not wanting to take in the nutrients and to detox appropriately? And a lot of times it's because your body's living in a state of fight or flight, and you got to help release that to allow the patients to start feeling better.
That's awesome. Okay, let's get back. I want to kind of go. We're going along talking about the mitochondria and getting that changed and so forth. When you assess them, do you pull any particular labs that you have them so you can assess the mold? Do you do hair samples? Do you
I do a lot of
get a
urine
cup,
samples.
blood?
Yeah.
What all do you do?
I do urine samples for mold toxicity. I also have patients that will have a mold specialist come out to their house and figure out what that looks like. Normally, when it comes to mold, obviously, if you do a urine sample, it doesn't necessarily tell you everything that's in the body. So we'll do some level of detox after we figure out what particular molds we may need to start to address, and then recheck it every about 3 months to make sure that things are fully clearing out. You may see it jump up super high, but that's a good thing because it's actually getting out of the system, but making sure they're not continuing to live in it, obviously. And then I do different blood work as well. So I check your inflammatory responses, I check your immune function, and to help that be a marker in between to make sure that you're improving and that your body is responding the way it needs to. Obviously, depending on the patient, how sensitive they are, you can start with all the way from homeopathy to full-on prescription binders. So it just kind of depends on the patient's toxicity rate and what happens.
Do you do homeopathy?
Yeah,
Oh,
for
awesome.
like some of like for like drainage components and candida, mycotoxin, I use a lot of dysbio stuff.
Okay. Do you see an increase of yeast, candida, mold? I don't know how long you've been in practice, but to me, it seemed back in the 60s, people were taking yeast supplements. I don't hear people taking yeast supplements more.
Well, actually,
But
your
it
gut.
seems to me like almost everyone's got high amounts of yeast candida that comes into my office.
For sure. I mean, one, it's a standard American diet, so the more sugar you have, the more likelihood you're going to have yeast in the body. But the other thing too is if somebody has mold, there's antibody receptor sites that line the gut lining, and it's actually they're basically programmed to recognize if there is yeast in the body. And so especially in the gut. And so it sits onto the antibody receptor sites, and your body's immune system should start gobbling up the yeast and clearing it out. If you've been exposed to mold or have high levels of mold in the body, what takes that spot is your mold. And so then these mold sit on those receptor sites. It no longer is responding to yeast. So 9 times out of 10, if somebody's been exposed to mold or living in mold or have mold toxicity, they're going to have yeast. And so that's one thing that if we keep having recurrent yeast infections, if we have recurrent, candida issues that's happening, thinking outside the box of like, well, why does this keep happening? If they're eating a pretty clean, low carbohydrate, not high sugar, dense diet, why does it keep coming back? And a lot of times it's because of mold exposure, or their immune system is just bogged down by molds, and then they keep getting this yeast recurrence.
Yeah. Yeast is not fun. When I first discovered yeast, I mean, it was literally growing on my feet, not my legs. I mean, and part of my issue is I had 13 amalgam fillings.
For sure.
Met Hal Huggins in 2004, and he gave me a 500-page report, and he looked at me and he says, "I don't even know why you're awake, because you got a high emotional component to get up and go every." I do. Well, I was fortunately, yeah, I got the mercury fillings out. I went to Montreal, Canada, where he supervised doing it because they tried to shut him down, tried to kill him first.
Oh,
You
geez.
know who Hal Huggins was?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and then he the next day I go to him, I go, "Oh my gosh, it's like it's a new day. I dreamed last night. I mean, every body function was all of a sudden working differently,
Yeah.
and yeah, so and I had a high amount of yeast. Oh my god. So
Yep. Because your drainage pathways aren't open either.
yeah, well,
Your
yeah,
If your immune system's hijacked and then you aren't draining and detoxing well, then it's like I always tell people, if you think of like a terrain where if your whole body is looking more like a swampy area, it's a lot easier for anything to overtake the area. But our goal is to try to create like a mountainous, terrain where even if you get a little bit of a bacteria or parasite or whatever, your body can start to attack and target it and it not take over the whole body.
Well, yeah, and I've been constipated. I didn't know I was.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I had to figure out the colon hydrotherapy part. Became a colon hydrotherapist.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a colon hydrotherapist I was aware of in Boise.
Sure.
I've since learned that they were kind of in the backwaters of a basement or a bedroom someplace.
For
They weren't
sure.
advertised in the yellow pages. You had to know somebody that knew somebody back in those days. So I developed, I put my own in and went at it. And I had no clue what I was doing, but I had to figure it out. But as an old farm boy, you kind of figure things out.
For
right?
sure. For sure.
So yeah, and that was a big game changer as well.
Absolutely.
So I assume do you see a lot of constipation in your practice as well?
Yep. I have anything from, I have a bowel movement every other day to the other day I had somebody that said they have a bowel movement once every 2.5 weeks. So just really, and people don't necessarily also know that that's not good.
I had a guy come here. He could barely talk. He said, "David, it's been 2 months." I said, "What?" I've had other people. They said, "Yeah, it's been 2 months. I can't eat." Yeah. And get this, Alicia, it took 11 days for the one person, 15 days for the other of constant colonics day after day to break it apart. And, think how many people who don't see a colon therapist, they just go and what they do. Just back out your colon.
Yeah.
Take it out.
People too. To not have a bowel movement for that many days.
No, it's very common. People 1 week, 2 weeks. I see it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're probably seeing more of those severe cases because
we're not this choice. Yeah, and we of course advertise and
for sure,
getting out a little bit. Yeah.
But when you ask people and they're like, "Oh, well, I've never had a bowel movement every day. I've always been, a once a week or whatever," and I was like, "Not good. That means whatever you ate on Monday is still in there next Monday. Would you put a burger on your counter for a week and think it's okay?"
Well, then think about this. Just think about what's happening, right? You got the tissue, and that stuff's got to go someplace. So it's squishing into the tissue, gets in the blood. Now you got poopy blood. Lymphatic system gets all mucked up, and then of course, if you're a woman, you got this lymphatic system that's all plugged up. And you're not exercising, you're not on a trampoline, you're not jumping, you're not moving the lymphatic system. And then, of course, what happens? Why do women get breast cancer more than men? I always ask them this question. Well, I don't know. Well, look at all these lymph nodes. Where are they at? Yeah. They're by the breast. Armpit. What are you wearing? You're wearing a bra.
Yep, that sucks it in.
Yeah.
Stops that lymphatic drainage.
Right there. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, hey, how much is genetics a part of this? You've been listening to our conversation with Dr. Alicia Hickson on the metabolic cause of cancer. If you miss any parts of the show, catch the entire interview on the podcast, wholebodydetoxshow.com. Wherever you get your podcasts, or find it at livingwaterscleanse.com. And while you're at livingwaterscleanse.com, check out the educational video called 4 Natural Laws of Healing at livingwaterscleanse.com, or call 208-378-9911. And also check out all the amazing success stories, some really cool testimonies over there. We'll be back in a moment. Nothing is more exciting than seeing a client shed their diseases and symptoms caused from accumulated toxins from the chemicals in our foods, the clothes we wear, and the air we breathe, than by cleansing through colon hydrotherapy and treating the whole body naturally. Here's what a few clients had to say about their experience at Living Waters Wellness Center.
My name's Richard. I came to Living Waters because I was low on energy and for my memory, and I've accomplished both. Living Waters did it for me. Thank you, Living Waters.
My name's Peg. I came to Living Waters about a year ago, so I run pretty hard when I'm working. But through this retreat, I think one of the biggest things that I've gained is that self-confidence. Thank you, Living Waters.
Hi, my name is Anna Lewis, and I came to do the 10-day cleanse because I hadn't been feeling really well, and so I could cleanse, get rid of parasites and toxins in my body, and those were great help. So thank you, Living Waters.
To learn more about the 10-day healing retreat, go to livingwaterscleanse.com, click on the link 4 Natural Laws of Healing, and watch the video and check out this hundreds of clients who healed from their symptoms under the Success Stories tab, or call the office at 208-378-9911. That's 208-378-9911. The preceding examples may not be typical of your experience, may not be right for you. Talk to a healthcare professional to see if cleansing is right for you. If you're just joining us, we're having a conversation with Dr. Alicia Hickson, who learned under Dr. Seafried, who discovered it's really all about metabolic health when it comes to cancer. And if you're missing parts of the show, you can catch everything at the podcast Whole Body Detox Show. Links on our website, livingwaterscleanse.com. episode 255. And by the way, we got a 10-day healing retreat coming up January 5th. If you want to start out the new year right, you want to learn about a 10-day healing retreat. Change your world forever. It's an amazing process. We get to watch miracles every cleanse. You guys are missing out, but you can watch some of those miracles over at Success Stories under the livingwaterscleanse.com tab, Success Stories. Check it all out there. This interview goes overtime, so you'll want to let's do it all. Catch it on the podcast.
So it depends. I mean, science, what we're taught in an integrative setting, especially in cancer world, it accounts for about 10% of what's happening. And across all diagnoses, there's always a role, right? You can have a genetic mutation that encourages your risk of cancer, but it doesn't mean you're going to get cancer. You can know all of your genetic risks and know that you're a bad detoxer and you have a high risk of cancer, but you can change your lifestyle. You can be regular with detoxing. You can be regular and mindful of what you're putting in your body. And, you may be a person that needs to be more mindful of what they do day in and day out. Some people's genetics, they're amazing detoxers. They're not likely to really want to create inflammation. And that's when you hear those people, they're like, put anything in their body and they live to 98. And that's not always the case, but most of the time it's just about 90% of the other is your environmentals and everything else, not necessarily the genetics that are causing it.
So I had this happen the other day. It's the first time I've cried in front of a client, 23 years of age, found out she had stage 0 cancer, took off both breasts.
It's really
Do you ever
bad.
recommend people that found out they have breast cancer, you say, let's just get rid of them?
I mean, stage 0, it doesn't make sense to do that.
Does it make any sense? Does it make any sense anywhere? I mean, at what point do you say, yeah, you better do it? Or what's your thoughts there? What have you seen? What's your experience been?
There's studies on it with breast cancer in itself that if like certain types that are very, very aggressive, there are studies that say, taking it off, you have a decreased risk of it coming back. You also have to think, are you talking about a person that's taking lifestyle changes and cleaning up their environment and doing all those different components and preventatives? Or are you talking about somebody that's not wanting to change anything and is just wanting it to be gone? So I think that's two different worlds and figuring out what patient you're dealing with. Is this patient living in a moldy house and refusing to make changes in their diet and whatever, that may be their best chance of survival is having that removed because they're not going to change the environment and everything else. And so the likelihood of it really metastasizing is probably a lot higher. But then you also have patients that they're going to make a drastic change. They don't want to have their breast removed. And so then that's when you can be monitoring your Natera test. There's a Signatera test that I use. It's circulating tumor cells. And so you can monitor them every 3 to 6 months.
You said Signatera?
Signatera. Yeah. And so it helps you to check for circulating tumor cells in the bloodstream. And I also use a DeHaas test, which also checks for circulating tumor cells, but also circulating stem cells.
Okay.
And so then that helps us to see, are you creating any cancerous tissue? And so then that can help us to be more proactive that like, okay, let's get you to a point where there's no signs of disease. And then let's continue to monitor these markers as time goes on and make sure cancer doesn't come back. And then I measure their Dutch test too, depending on if it's what kind of breast cancer they have going on, or what their initial Dutch test looked like.
Tell me, refresh my memory, what's a Dutch test?
Sex hormone test. So it tells you the metabolisms of your estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. And so there's a 4-OH estrogen that actually encourages DNA damage and encourages the risk of cancer. There's also a methylation component there that it talks through. And so if you're not a great methylator, it's going to tell you that you're storing or holding on to higher levels of estrogen than you should be. And then it's turning into toxic forms of estrogen. So then I maintain all of those things and I watch those things carefully to make sure that cancer doesn't have an ability to want to come back. I do more preventative components to that, but ultimately I can't tell patients to do one versus the other, right? Because it's ultimately this is their lifestyle and what they're going to have to be doing regularly. And so in an ideal world, I also love to use mistletoe and things like that to keep, natural immunotherapy going or natural immune support to make sure cancer doesn't come back in that way. And then I also use hyperthermia, which is localized hyperthermia, and it heats tumor tissue to 42 degrees Celsius or hotter, which actually can kill off stem cells and it can kill off tumors. People can use it in conjunction with chemotherapy. They can use it in conjunction with IV therapies that have anti-cancer properties, anti-parasitic medication that people love to use it with, but it basically just creates a feverish response in that area and it starts to wake up the immune system, start targeting that area, but then also whatever you're using as an anti-cancer or anti-tumoral agent is going to be more directed to that area because of the feverish response that's happening.
What are you using for that? What kind of a tool are you using?
Called a thermofield.
Called a thermofield?
Thermofield,
Do I
yeah.
lay on this? Is it something the machine
It's about what, 6 inches by 10 inches pad that you're going to put on different areas of the body, especially like the primary tumor spot, as long as it's about 8 centimeters below the surface.
Okay.
And so you can put it over a spot that they had a lumpectomy, let's say,
Yep.
and you can put it over that spot. And so really the big goal of, chemo and all these other components that they want to do is to make sure that the stem cells or any micro invasion is actually gone. And so you can use this thermofield and put it over there, and it also will kill it. You can direct, your any treatments towards it, IV therapies towards it. And so then that's a way to, and then you're obviously heating up the tumor's tissue, and it encourages healing to that area.
Is this something I buy and take home and put on? Come to your office
No,
and do?
yeah, it's a machine that we have in our office,
Okay.
and then you place it on different areas. So like for example, we had a woman that has a bunch of mets in her bones. And
Bunch of
bones
what in your bones?
Metastasis.
Okay.
So breast cancer metastasis in her bones. And chemo, unfortunately, is just really hard to get to the bones because of the circulation component. And so it doesn't normally touch very easily. And so what she's been doing is she puts the thermofield over the large mets in the bone or metastasis to the bones. And she did a scan, and one tumor that was in the largest tumor in her spine actually shrunk to a level where they were shocked, and I think I don't even know if there's any left. I don't want to necessarily say that there's none left, but there was minimal left.
Okay.
And the oncologist was like, "What are you doing? Like, we weren't planning to shrink stuff. We were trying to maintain pretty much where she was at, was really the goal of treatment." And they're like, "Okay, well now this this part of the spine is, shrinking, but didn't shrink as much. So you should move whatever you're using down to here." And so it's just fun because, oncologists are starting to see too, like there is a world where we can combine these things together to help make a better outcome for patients, especially those that are wanting to do conventional medicine, but there's a role where we can make that works better, or patients choose to not do it without it. It really depends, but hyperthermia is a really great tool. Mayo used to use hyperthermia, but from my understanding, the machine that they had would actually burn people's skin before it actually would heat tumors, so they took it away.
Oh.
And so Thermofield, they created a device that is skin saving. So it doesn't burn the skin, but it reaches 8 centimeters beneath the tumor or the skin surface. And tumors itself has poor circulation in general. So that area tends to store a ton of heat. So the tumor itself stores a ton of heat, and then your healthy tissue disperses. And so you don't burn your healthy tissue, but you're heating up the tumor or the cancerous tissue.
How long do you have this device on you?
45 minutes. Yeah, 45 minutes. And patients do it like 1 to 2 times a week. And then obviously it's ideal to do it before you do any type of anti-cancer, fill in the blank.
Right.
Chemo, people use it in conjunction with, if they choose to do radiation, it helps prevent side effects from radiation too.
Oh, really?
So there's different
Okay.
components there that can help, and it can encourage healing. It's also a good maintenance tool too, to make sure that tumors don't come back in certain areas. There was a study on thermofield or heat therapy that it changes the microtumor environment, especially the study was on triple negative breast cancer, because that's one of the more challenging ones.
That means triple negative. What's that mean?
What does that mean? It
Yes,
means that they took a biopsy of the tumor, and they checked for estrogen, progesterone, and HER2 positive. Okay. And they basically all came back negative. There's not an estrogen component to it. There's not a progesterone component. There's not a HER2 positive component to it. And so it limits patients' treatment tools in a conventional world, because a lot of our chemos, immunotherapies, things like that are going to target one of those three.
Okay.
And so that's what triple negative means. It's negative to all three that we most commonly see.
Okay. We're going there.
Yeah. So, but it changes the microenvironment, so then it can make it easier for the body to target or kill off triple negative breast cancer, because you're changing the environment. You're not allowing it to be I don't want to say necessarily enticing, but an encouraging environment for cancer to thrive. And so by changing that environment, tumors have a more difficulty with functioning.
Yeah. People come in, breast cancer. Do you assess, okay, where are we at with the parasitics? What do you find there?
I do a full body workup, right? So you're dealing with a whole person, you're dealing with an ecosystem. And so my first visit, I talk through everything. Some patients don't mind it. Some people don't like it because you dive deep into everything. So I look at, their diet, their lifestyle, their living environment, their physical, emotional, mental traumas. I touch base on all of it. And I'm like, I'm not trying to pry. I'm just telling you that this is important. And so then we go through all of these different components of potentially what is the reason why, what drove us to get cancer in the first place. And I help them to start targeting and seeing like, hey, this is probably a factor, or like they had a sudden death they haven't fully grieved from. You hear that story happen all the time where, a spouse left them, they had some terrible relationship or divorce or something that happened, and then they developed breast cancer. And they're like, well, it was 2 years of just stress and trauma, and then I got breast cancer. And it's like, well, that's not isolated, right? There's probably more to it in terms of, obviously maybe not eating well, gaining weight, things along those lines that kind of create a perfect storm. And so we pick through all of that, and then I do a thorough lab analysis and then any secondary testing that I see that makes sense. So looking at the risk factors and in breast cancer, a lot of times you're checking hormones, you're checking their gut health, you're checking toxic load, you're checking mold, depends on what they're exposed to. And then once you have labs, you're assessing what's happening, then you can start to figure out, okay, these are the treatment modalities or the modalities that I can support their mitochondria the best. And so then you find those different components. So sometimes it's antiparasitics, sometimes it's vitamin C, sometimes it's looking at, people love EGCG. They love all these different fancy like supplements and medications that get viral, but just because it works for some people doesn't mean it works for everybody. So it's very intentional on what we use, why we use, and making sure that we're looking at the whole person to make sure that it fits their clinical picture.
Okay, parasites though. Do you send out for a test on parasites or do you muscle test?
So I do some muscle testing,
Okay.
but also in terms of like a lot of my patients, they're looking at antiparasitics as the anti-cancer components. 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a patient that has cancer that probably has parasites. You also look, and when they start antiparasitics, you can see eosinophils and monocytes jump up the second couple weeks after they start antiparasitics. So then that's like confirmatory to me of like, yep, there's probably parasites, or they see the
In other words, the
parasites.
body is reacting to go after that.
Yep.
Right.
Their immune system's reacting. And so then that's kind of confirmatory. But then also they were wanting to use it as synergy with their conventional care. You can use it obviously as an anti-cancer property. There's so many studies on ivermectin and these other guys that disrupt DNA replication. They make it more challenging for for cancer to function and grow. It has like some angiogenesis dysfunction that can happen with it. So it's a very helpful tool that you can use, and then you can pulse them in appropriate fashions depending on what their
Back
lab.
up there, you said something. You said you can pulse them. What do you mean?
So some people normally start with like a 10 to 15 days or 20 days where they're doing some kind of continual anti-parasitic protocol.
Okay.
But then when you start using it as like a anti-cancer property, you don't, just like with chemo, right? You don't want to be giving it every single day for the next 50 days because the tumors get smart, they change, they morph, they're not going to be as sensitive to it. So then you can pulse these different components so that it's not becoming resistant to it. And so then you can pulse them in different fashions. So like 4 days on, 3 days off, 3 days on, 4 days off, whatever that may look like.
Do you also look at, let's say you take a person that's got breast cancer. Have you tracked left side, right side, how much the emotional component of female energy on the left side of the body, male energy on the right side of the body? Do you ever tie into that, track that?
Well, you probably will be able to speak better to this, but I think one side is more associated with trauma or emotional components, and then the left side is more with like infectious components or inflammation components. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, yeah, but
I think it's like
on cancer, what I found is dang near 100% of the time, I haven't kept exact number, but usually I'll ask on breast cancer, especially left side, usually female energy. Sure enough, there's been some row in the family, or on the right side, male energy. I've seen it kill people because they get through the emotional component. They keep attacking the physical, jumping off and taking things and doing RSO oil and doing cannabis and doing all these different things. These guys start throwing things physically at it. What I picked up early on, a couple I'm thinking of right now, was that, okay, you got some major stuff going on here. And I've asked them, and they go, oh, yeah, my mom or my sister or whatever, we don't get along, or you've been attacked, yada yada. Yeah, it's been pretty.
I mean, definitely.
Yeah.
I guess I can't necessarily speak to the left versus the right. You'll probably be a better resource on that. But I definitely, with breast cancer, especially ones that aren't responding, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have somebody that has some kind of emotional trauma that's playing a big role. I always tell patients it's like women that have emotional, mental, sexual traumas, they tend to get breast cancers and gynecological cancers, and men tend to get colorectal cancers and prostate cancers.
Yes.
So that's kind of my like spew. So whenever anybody like comes in, and especially guys when they're like, why are you asking me about my childhood? And I'm like, well, you have prostate cancer, and a lot of times emotional mental health has a lot to do with why prostate cancer can, be the ideal spot for cancer to grow in your body.
Yeah.
So let's break that down.
Yeah.
And just taking off that wall of like, this is just what you see.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna take away that veil and make it less uncomfortable for you because this is just what it is. And now let's try to pull back and figure out what we need to do about it.
Have you read the book by Louise Hay?
No, I have not seen that. Or I've not read
You got to get it.
Louise Hay.
Louise Hay. Go to Hay House. You can heal your life. Pop it up. Get that book. Pull it in, and just start tracking all the areas in the body, and then the emotional component that's tied to that, like liver's anger, right? My dad had a kidney stone, and I thought he was dying. I didn't know what was going on, but he had a huge kidney stone. And he was pissed off because there's people trying to take his land. And that dang near killed him. But
And so kidney is a lot to do with your anger.
As well. That's interesting. That's fascinating. And sure enough, like I had a gal in here, she was smoking weed to take care of the pain. She didn't want to, but nothing else worked. Everything else just made her head just totally foggy, really bad, made her sick. I'm going back to it. I says, when did it start? When did you get type 1 diabetes? She said, I was 4 years old. I said, what happened to you at 4? She said, my mom and dad. That's the sweetness of life. That's the pancreas. And just had another gal the other day, same story almost, only it was at age 9. Yeah, it was scary. Mom and dad divorced, I guess. Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not uncommon that you see that. And that's why I always
it's awesome. I meet another person that's you're tracking alike and in a little bit different way. But I find it totally fascinating. There's always that component. And as human beings, come on. I grew up born in 57, and we've been told all our life, boys don't cry, tough it up, tough it out. And meanwhile, you're storing that energy yourselves, and someday something's going to pop.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. You definitely see that.
So what would you say to someone got breast cancer, got some pets, maybe you got some cats? Obviously, in my book, that means you certainly got parasites. As I've heard Seafried talk, he talks a lot about that as well. But what have you seen? What are your just there?
I mean, for like, are you talking about detoxing out of all the ganglion?
Yeah, you say, hey, let's get rid of the cats, let's get rid of the dogs, let's go someplace else, and let's get the environment cleaned up so you can heal.
For sure. I mean, that just depends on what patients, depending on how healthy they can handle it. You can't necessarily put some of these patients through heavy detox if they're actively in really not great shape, just because it can be too much on their body at times. But if they're healthy enough, then I love doing like EBU. I love doing iodose vitamin C infusions that can be really helpful.
Back up. You said some EBU?
EBU. Yeah. EBU is basically, it looks like a dialysis system, really, but it pulls blood out and then it ozonates the blood, and it has a collection container that pulls out any of the gunk or things that don't belong. And then it puts the ozonated or oxygenated blood back into the system.
Is that what they call a 10 pass?
No. So a 10 pass, you just take blood out, you ozonate it, put it back in. Where the EBU actually has a filtration system attached to it. I don't, but I refer a lot of patients to do it. And so to purchase one.
No, to do it, to just do EBO, is it very expensive?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where you go. I mean, it can range for anywhere from like $1,500 to $3,500 a session. And normally you do like 2 to 4 of them, but it depends on where you go, honestly.
Okay.
For the price of how much it costs.
Compared to a 10 pass, that system.
So they've actually taken out the waste container and put it through like a environmental toxin panel. And what they're pulling out is metals, molds, chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, plastics. So you're pulling it out of the body, where when you're doing a 10 pass, you're not filtering out. You're relying on your own detox system to filter out for you.
Makes sense.
So that's where there's a difference there.
Yeah. I love ozone. My mother's got dementia. She has a big bump on her head. I never think much of it. I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. But I have just a basic ozone machine, and she's got to do some nose inhalation every time she does. And I'm going, yeah, Mom, yeah, we gotta get that. And she does, and she's runs constipated, so I'm giving her colonics all the time.
Yeah.
But there's a big
ozone's great for mold and bacteria and parasites, and I love it for all of that because it's a good antimicrobial, but also it provides a lot of oxygen to the cells, and so then it's really good for your mitochondrial health too.
Yeah. No, I think I got one about 3 or 4 years ago, and I read the Dr. Schallenberger.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Read his
the godfather of ozone.
I went, dang, sign me up.
Yeah. For sure.
Not that everyone should have one in their home.
Yeah.
Because I'm a guy that has everything in my home. So, do you have hyperbaric chamber in your facility?
So in coming February, we're going to have like a larger facility. We're going to have hyperbaric, red light, a full IV suite, all of that. That will be part of it.
Awesome. You get
We're
a
getting
hard shell?
Yeah, ideally. Just depending on how much you. So Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, he's kind of the one that talks a lot about hyperbaric. Newer studies are coming out to show too that some of these the hard shells obviously is great, but patients have a hard time accessing, hard shells, especially if they want to do them in their home. And what he's starting to slowly come out in studies is that, even if you're doing 1.8, 2.5 ranges, they're still just as beneficial if you're doing a 3.5 or, or 3.0 and above or whatever. And so they're essentially saying that like soft shell, hard shell kind of doesn't necessarily have to be one direction versus another in terms of providing oxygen for patients in terms of cancer. But hard shells are great because obviously you're just providing more pressure and helping get more
Yeah.
oxygen.
I almost died in 2021. I had never done hyperbaric.
Mhm.
And a gal that used to work for me found out how sick I was, and she was working in a hyperbaric chamber place, and she called me and says, "You got to get David over there. He's got to go do it right now." And eventually I did. I mean, I was so sick. I mean, when you're sick, you can't think well.
For sure.
I knew for me is like, I didn't come to the office for hard 2 months.
Yeah.
That's not me. I work all the time. And yeah, I got that first session. Like, whoo, this is awesome. I did 20 sessions, and I just bought a chamber for myself.
Yeah, hyperbaric's great. There's some really nice ones. I have a guy that I work with on the East Coast and there's a double chamber hard shell you can actually sit up in it.
Yeah, mine. You have to lay down, and I'm trying to get my mom in that. It's hard for mom 86 to get in that. We got in it,
Yeah.
and this one's roomy, about
Mhm.
36 inches, but it's a little tight for both of us. I have to go in there because she needs help doing the mask and coaching her to clear her ears. I had her in the big hard shell, which of course plenty of room. Those things are 100 grand.
Mm-hmm.
But we could get mom past in the hard shell 1.5. So on this one, I'm at 1.3, and
Mm-hmm.
it's bigger. And I also did contrast oxygen with her as well, which is with the LiVo2 machine. I've had those people on the show as well. I've had two people I just recently last.
Livo 2 is really good for dementia patients.
I know I've got hallelujah. Say that again.
Livo 2 is really good for patients that have dementia for sure.
I'm gonna cut that clip.
There's a whole like process with it, but it can work really, really well.
Every time she comes over here, I put her on the machine, just 15 minutes, and it also helps with her hip. She had a hip replacement. But I had a football player played for the San Francisco 49ers, severe concussions, and it saved his life. He's done over 160 treatments. Just had a guy that did bobsledding, 6-time world champion, wheel person. His dad bought him. He was ready to kill himself. He was praying to get pancreatic cancer because he knew that people died fast with pancreatic cancer. He's praying for this. And his dad got him a soft shell, and he's on Instagram as one man in a chamber. Had him on the show. Fascinating story. But he's now wanting to build a facility to let other bobsledders and people come in. Get this, with bobsledding, every time you go down, it's micro concussions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Every trip.
Yep.
You're guaranteed to do that sport. You're going to walk away with no brain. All his buddies killed themselves.
Well, and that's also where, like with professional athletes, I always talk about because I see some patients that are in the professional athlete world, and if we know that they've gotten concussions or so forth, like even just doing IV glutathione ahead of time with some hyperbaric, that can be a game changer to protect their health, their brain health. And then there's a supplement that Quicksilver came out with called neuropregnenolone, and that also can be really good for.
I gotta put all these fancy words in.
But it's really good for your brain and helps with cognitive functioning, brain healing. But hyperbaric, glutathione, those are kind of like a sweet sauce to be able to utilize. And obviously oxygen therapy as much as you can. Some people even just get like a nasal cannula to take in their bed and they sleep with it all night long just to kind of helping decrease inflammation in the brain and promote healing.
You've been listening to our conversation with Dr. Alicia Hickson on the metabolic cause of cancer. If you miss any parts of the show, catch the entire interview on the podcast, wholebodydetoxshow.com. Wherever you get your podcasts, or find it at livingwaterscleanse.com. And while you're at livingwaterscleanse.com, check out the educational video called 4 Natural Laws of Healing at livingwaterscleanse.com, or call 208-378-9911. And also check out all the amazing success stories, some really cool testimonies over there. We'll be back in a moment. Nothing is more exciting than seeing a client shed their diseases and symptoms caused from accumulated toxins, from the chemicals in our foods, the clothes we wear, and the air we breathe. then by cleansing through colon hydrotherapy and treating the whole body naturally. Here's what a few clients had to say about their experience at Living Waters Wellness Center.
My name's Richard. I come to Living Waters because I was low on energy and for my memory, and I've accomplished both. Living Waters did it for me. Thank you, Living Waters.
My name's Peg. I came to Living Waters about a year ago, so I run pretty hard when I'm working. But through this retreat, I think one of the biggest things that I've gained is that self-confidence. Thank you, Living Waters.
Hi, my name is Anna Lewis, and I came to do the 10-day cleanse because I hadn't been feeling really well, and so I could cleanse, get rid of parasites and toxins in my body, and those were great help. So thank you, Living Waters.
To learn more about the 10-day healing retreat, go to livingwaterscleanse.com, click on the link 4 Natural Laws of Healing, and watch the video and check out this hundreds of clients who healed from their symptoms under the Success Stories tab, or call the office at 208-3789-911. That's 208-3789-911. The preceding examples may not be typical of your experience, may not be right for you. Talk to a healthcare professional to see if cleansing is right for you. If you're just joining us, we're having a conversation with Dr. Alicia Hickson, who learned under Dr. Seafried, who discovered it's really all about metabolic health when it comes to cancer. And if you miss any parts of the show, you can catch everything at the podcast Whole Body Detox Show. Links on our website, livingwaterscleanse.com, episode 255. And by the way, we got a 10-day healing retreat coming up January 5th. If you want to start out the new year right, you want to learn about a 10-day healing retreat. Change your world forever. It's an amazing process. We get to watch miracles every cleanse. You guys are missing out, but you can watch some of those miracles over at Success Stories under the livingwaterscleanse.com tab, Success Stories. Check it all out there. This interview goes overtime, so you'll want to let's do it all. Catch it on the podcast. So what's the hooked up to?
Oxygen.
Oh, just oxygen. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So like people that can't afford to do hyperbaric treatments, that's something that, if you can just get an oxygen tank, just continuous oxygen tank, or some people do even like hydrogen. Inhaled hydrogen, that's another component that can be really helpful for brain health.
You said something, hydrogen what?
Inhaled hydrogen.
Oh, inhale hydrogen. Okay. And is that and then that was with the machine as well? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. That's cool to know.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're those are you're going to get one of those in. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about diet? Let's get into diet. Now I know I've got my little device here.
Yep. Keto mojo meter.
So let's talk about this. Let's walk down the keto lane and talk about the blood sugars. And this is Seafried really goes deep into this.
Yep. I actually created it should launch in January. I'm doing an educational course kind of around getting started in the metabolic approach.
Okay.
But essentially what you're looking for is, so many people are like, what do I eat? Well, there's a list of low carbohydrate foods, and I give to patients and help them to understand what's low carbohydrate, what's healthy fats, what's their macros. And I work with a lot of nutritionists that help me with patients that need to have that consistent hand holding of like, hey, this is the macros. Let's make sure you're eating enough, because patients, when they decide they want to do like a ketogenic diet, right? They're like, okay, carbs are bad. I'm going 0 carbs. Well, some patients can handle that, but some people can't. And so I had a patient once that would eat chicken breasts and olive oil only, and his blood sugars were higher than most diabetics. And people are like, well, how is that possible? And it's like, because the body's starving itself and it's breaking down muscles as a fuel source, and your blood sugars are spiking. And so some people do need some level of carbohydrates to help with that blood sugar balancing. So there's a sweet spot. And so what I normally have patients do is they start off with like a continuous glucose monitor. So I do like the Lingos, or there's somebody else there's a new one that came out too that they just put on the back of their arm, and you measure what your blood sugars do throughout the course of the day. I don't care what ketones are doing just yet. We want to look at your blood sugars are doing, because that's going to tell them, when I drive in traffic, my blood sugar spiked to 160. When I eat this bread, it spikes to 150. And I kind of give them a range of like trying to keep your blood sugars always less than 110, especially when you get started. And so I look at, they look at their blood sugars throughout the course of the day, and then they're going to be like, they write down like my blood sugar spiked when I did whatever, when I woke up in the morning or whatever. And then I start giving them to say, okay, now it's been 2 weeks since you've been making these changes, or 1 to 2 weeks or so. I have them start to measure their ketones. And so then that's when you really start using the blood sugar, the keto mojo meter, where you're measuring the blood sugars and ketones and making sure they're actually getting into ketosis. Like, are you producing ketones? Some people have genetic mutations that make it more difficult for them to get into ketosis. So many of my patients are like, well, I'm eating low carb keto, I have to be in ketosis. Well, that's not true either. There can be reasons, or you're not eating enough or whatever, that's not allowing your body to produce ketones. If you have a clogged up liver, you're having a hard time, you're going to have much more difficult time producing ketones than somebody that doesn't. So check and we make sure that that's actually the case. But Dr. Seifert will talk about like GKI, or the glucose ketone index. That's that,
Right.
buzzword that he talks a lot about. And ideally, you want to have patients to be less than 4. And so, well, at like standard to get your GK less than 4. Brain tumors, ideally less than 1. And then all other cancers, if you're having active cancer, it's like around that 2 to 3 range, depending on who you are. Also, your weight and all of that type of thing. So that's why I always tell patients, sometimes they hear, oh, brain tumors less than 1, I have to be less than 1. And then they come to you and they've lost a ton of weight. And they're like, well, why am I losing weight? It's like, well, you don't need to be in that space for one. Two, your diet is not appropriate because you're not eating enough. And so there's just a lot of a personal approach to also just even looking at your blood sugars and your ketones and making sure you're getting enough, but also that you're maintaining ketosis healthily. But that's really like the Dr. Seifert will look at is that GKI, keeping it low, measuring, because you can eat, like one person could eat asparagus and kick them out of ketosis. Another person could eat, a banana and it keeps them in ketosis. So it doesn't necessarily mean that one person's going to respond the same way that somebody else will, but there's kind of a set of things that most commonly will keep you into ketosis healthily. And then we kind of go from there and make sure that it actually is doing such.
Do you find that it's based upon their blood type?
I can't necessarily correlate that.
Okay. All right.
I don't necessarily correlate that. I think it has a lot to do with their stress levels. I think it has a lot to do with how they prepare it. And also if they are getting enough healthy fats in and enough protein. Because if they're a high exerciser, high stress person, not sleeping well, they're going to be less likely to get into ketosis appropriately. So I see it more of like the whole person environment component than just a
Right.
blood type.
Right.
Because I can normally pinpoint if people are not producing ketones onto why they're not producing ketones. That's kind of like Dr. Seyfried's GKI in a nutshell, but it's trying to bring your ketones down, but working with a nutritionist or someone that's trained in what you're doing, because it's easy for people to malnourish themselves. Let's just say that.
Yeah. He talks a lot about glutamine. You want to talk to that?
Yeah, so he breaks down between blood sugars, or so cancer thriving off of 2 fermentable fuels, glucose and glutamine. This comes from the mitochondria, or sorry, this comes from the Warburg effect that Dr. Otto Warburg developed or understood and researched back in the 20s, where, he saw that these cancer cells are thriving off of sugar. And then Dr. Seyfried took it that one step further and was like, actually, they're able to do glucose and they're doing it with glutamine. And so he'll talk through like, it's important to be decreasing glucose and decreasing glutamine as much as you can. But if patients are not into ketosis and then you're trying to do all these glutamine inhibitors and so forth, but their blood sugars are at 160, it's not necessarily beneficial. So obviously that press is going to be that diet, getting into ketosis, getting your GKI low. And then there's different modalities that you can utilize as glutamine inhibitors. One of the ones that they talk a lot about is DON, which is not legal to get here in the States.
What's Dawn? What's
It's a glutamine inhibitor. It's an IV,
that? Okay.
but it's not legal here in the States to get. And so there are different
It
other
must work well, huh? Must be really
Huh?
good.
And so there are other modalities that you can utilize, like some antiparasitics have anti-glutamine properties. Certain supplements have glutamine or anti-glutamine properties that you can utilize and pulse in. Obviously, checking to make sure that your numbers are going in appropriate direction is always necessary. But there is a new drug that Dr. Seifert, I talked to him not long ago, that there's a guy, I think in Europe somewhere, that's thinking that there's this drug that can actually decrease glutamine, and it's actually legal here in the States. And so there is some to come there, but not necessarily sure exactly if that's true or not. So different ways to do it.
Are you using, obviously when we're talking, got parasites, what are you using for antiparasite? What do you do for that?
So, I mean, it depends. I use like ivermectin and pyrantemoid and praziquantel and mebendazole. All of those are good. And then you have also like artemisinin and your clove and wormwood and so forth that I use. Just depends on, like, I look at their labs. So it helps me to see like what's most appropriate. Where's the tumor at? Ivermectin does a really good job for things in the lungs. It does a really good thing, obviously, systemically, but you may change your approach based off of where the tumor is located, based off of what antiparasitic can really be more potent in that organ system.
So yeah, I've read that certain parasites it's best for ivermectin and mezidol versus black walnut, green hull, and cloves and wormwood.
Mhm.
So you're taking a look at that as well.
For sure. Absolutely. And so, and then people that, I mean, if you're talking just like addressing parasites, I do some parasite testing, especially if we know that they have high levels of parasites. That I like to do parasitetesting.com that I do, and it's a stool culture. And then it helps us to see at least what family of parasites, because they actually look old school under a microscope for the parasites and test them. And they find the eggs and the larvae of it, or the larvae and the actual living organisms. And so then they're able to help kind of pinpoint what antiparasitics would work the best.
I've been doing stool samples.
Yeah. Yep. And then I do like a full-on GI map. I like doing the GI map or diagnostic solutions GI map that I
Yep.
do a lot of antiparasites. So you can still see some parasites in there. There's not a ton of parasites on their test, but they have an eosinophilic activation protein that can be signs of parasites too. Obviously, it also can be signs of food sensitivities, but if that's high in the clinical picture and so forth, and labs come back, you can kind of infer that there's some parasites going on there.
We had so many people come in that said, I'm all clear of parasites. I'm good. I blah, blah, blah. And then then by the end of the cleanse, they're seeing, 2 to 6 foot tapeworms come out. And
Mhm. Yep, not uncommon.
I've had doctors tell me, my patient said he was at your place and he had parasites coming. I said, yeah, that's true. And he goes, but it didn't come out on the test. So,
Yep, it doesn't always do that. I mean, what they talk through is if your monocyte's high, your basophils are high, your eosinophils are high. That's an easy way to look in your blood work to see if there's parasites. More time than not, there's a parasite. Most other countries, honestly, they do parasite cleanses every 6 months to a year. And so like doing some general parasite cleanses isn't also a bad thing.
oh, come on. We're in the United States. We have no parasites. Every
Have you
time I
read,
hear that, I hear that all the time.
have you ever read the book Your Brain on Parasites?
I think so. And I also had Anne Louise Gittleman on my second podcast. Cool story. Do you know who she is? Old timer in the industry, big on colon hydrotherapy.
Yeah.
Nutritionist, has her own line. Anyway, early on, in fact, she almost quit her career. She was working as a nurse in New York City, and this little boy came in at cancer, and she goes and she went and found a colon hydrotherapist and had a ton of parasites, took care of all that, helped him get on black walnut, cloves, and wormwood, took care of it, healed him. Then she got fired for doing that, left her, and so she went away for a year. She said, "Can't do that," but she wrote a book. Guess what came to dinner? Yeah, great read.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for sure. Like patients that have panic attacks, anxiety. I have a lot of people too, like eating disorders that have parasites. And so
Makes a lot of sense.
I had a girl that she had been being seen by GI for 2 years and was pretty much vomiting, puking,
Oh,
diarrhea for about, I at least a year. Okay. I'm pretty sure it was closer to 2 years. And so, with what I do, sometimes people is just like, I'm like last Hail Mary of like, what else am I going to do? And this girl's 18 years old and
oh,
slowly losing weight. And so then they kind of pushed her as like, you probably have an eating disorder and you're probably doing something because all of your tests came back clean. So they kind of labeled her as an eating disorder not otherwise specified. And so, and I just was like, I feel like there's more going on here. Like you don't just randomly want to puke every morning. She was like, I feel like I'm pregnant. I don't even know what it looks like to be pregnant, but I have morning sickness every day. And I'm like, well, if you have parasites and things like that in your gut and toxins are getting released all night long, you're going to feel nauseous, right? And so then we put her through literally one round of antiparasitics, and she was like, I have no more nausea. So we still had some loose stools happening, but she had no more nausea. And so then she was able to eat. And then she started to gain some weight. And so then, it's been several rounds of doing antiparasitics. And so we're starting to get it. So then she went from having 10 loose stools a day to now having one every 2 to 3 days. But, she's been doing this for 2 to 3 years. So it's going
wow.
to
Did she do any
take time.
colonics?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
normally send people after like halfway through and then at the end of their parasite cleanses to do at least 1 to 2 colonics. Obviously, if patients can, they do more.
Yeah, do more.
But I'm like, at least do this so that you can get things moving. And then just sometimes patients don't always want to do that. But then when you get them at least doing one, they're like, actually, it felt amazing and I want to do that again.
Yeah. No, I got to tell you some wild stories. We find here, we do 10 days straight on our healing retreat. We're applying the herbs, we're applying the pulse frequency, testing for what frequency they need to go after those little bugs. And we do the liver cleanse. And it seems like after that, because we've done all the emotional tools as well, they really let go and they'll have more come out in the last 2 days of the cleanse than all the previous days combined sometimes.
For
And
sure.
then some have came back, they kept doing it. I had one gal, she went to work for me. That's how I get my employees.
Mm-hmm.
She came into my office one day, said, David. But what? She goes, you got to tell them they got to come back after the 10-day and do 4 days, 6 different times throughout the year. So 4 liver cleanse follow-ups. I go, why that number? She says, that's what I just did. I had another big nest drop out. And I've seen that so many times. It's like,
So crazy.
there's still more coming. Those
Well, do you also see that when people are in the middle of a parasite cleanse, they have a ton of emotional releases?
well, that happens right away sometimes. The
Mhm.
client bed,
And they're
sometimes
like,
that triggers the emotions. Yeah.
and they're like, I'm like remembering things of what happened when I was a kid and all this stuff, and I'm processing through this. Why is that? I've been much more emotional and crying about stuff that used to happen. And I was like, parasites and all of that hold emotion. And that's another huge component that you see. And so I always tell people, I'm like, if you start getting anxious, frustrated, mad, reliving all this stuff, you need to poop more. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, if you start pooping, you're gonna feel better.
I've had some of the wildest things happen, and I'm going to say this anyway. Probably shouldn't. I mean, the parasite. I swear, people come in. Yeah, I want to do the 10-day. They're talking to me why they need to do it, and then they get all registered, signed up, blah blah blah, and then they start wanting to talk themselves out of it. I swear it's the parasites. Get this: we had a gal, severe rheumatoid arthritis. I wish I would have took pictures of her hands. She did the 10-day. Her friend talked her into it, paid for it because she didn't love herself enough to do it for herself, but her friend convinced her by twisting her arm to do it. So she did the 10 days. She's coming back doing a follow-up liver cleanse. And one day my therapist comes into the kitchen where we have. She goes, David, the hot water's out. No, it's not. Turn on the hot water in the kitchen. Look at this. Feel it. I check the hot water heater's 140 degrees, coming out fine. I said, it's in room 3. I go, who's on room? Told me, go, parasite. Goes back around the corner because the machine dropped to 70 degrees. We used to keep it around 100 degrees, the bed. 102 degrees, the water. She goes back in. At that point, she had just pooped out a big old nest of parasites. Machine goes back on, water starts coming back up. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, the sink and the parasite or the colonic bed is like 10 feet apart from the pipes, right?
So crazy.
I've seen lights turn off by parasites.
Did you know who Dr. Simon Yu is?
Simon who?
Simon Yu.
No, I don't know him.
So he's a doctor that practices in St. Louis.
Okay.
I also studied under him in terms for like antiparasitics and so forth. He was an officer in, I believe, Bolivia, and essentially nothing was working or he didn't really have access to anything when he was there. And so he had antiparasitics. And so he started giving people concoctions of antiparasitics, and they'd come and be like, my asthma's gone. My cancer's gone. My
Yeah.
anxiety's gone. And so then it kind of drove him into this path to understand more about parasites. And one of his classes that he was talking about, he was saying that he started somebody on this parasite cleanse, and he goes, this woman said that she literally saw like this, what did he call it? Entity of some kind, like moving in her back and then like release out of her body. And I was like, what are you talking about? And it's like, this is things where like people will talk about like flies coming off or like just random things. And it's far beyond what I understand, but I've heard it too.
Get this. This guy came out from New Hampshire. This is wild. I was going to ask you about water fasting, so we can go there next for a hot moment. But his wife says, you're fat. Okay, I'll do a 3-day water fast. Worms start coming out, right? He goes, what's this? Goes to a bunch of different doctors, naturopaths, does all the different things, not getting help, does some colonics, still not getting the help he needs. This after 6 months, finally sits down with the CFO and his lawyer, says, we're finding someplace in the world to fix me. Let's go. And so they spent 7 hours, finds us, comes out here. He's worked in restoration after floods and damages. So he's been in some pretty nasty places. But get this, he got the Pfizer shot. And he's showing me pictures. And he got pictures in the viewing tube of these little blue nanobots. That's what I believe they were. And he's got them circling in the toilet. They're springing up. I'm going like, whoa, this is wild. But I'd had Dr. Anna Marie Mahelchik on the show about a year and a half ago. Do you know who she is?
Mm.
Oh, my word. That
Okay.
podcast was wild. Anyway, yeah, look her up. She's got a Substack, and she's been showing what's in the blood from the people having the shots. He's got these. Well, I believe everyone that's had the Pfizer, that's my belief, has got these in them, and they're little lights. And she showed me in the screen on the. Yeah, if you look it up on our show, I'll put that in the show notes too, guys. I had to put that one on BitChute and Rumble because YouTube's not going to let me put that up. Anyway, yeah, it was wild. It was amazing. She says, David, we're seeing this in the deer coming in, deer blood. She lives in Yelm, Washington. So people are bringing some of the samples from the animals that they've harvested and so forth, and they're seeing this stuff there as well. I mean, it's crazy.
That's wild. I mean,
He's different now, though. He is so thankful. He's a different guy. So, do you suggest water fasting as part of the cancer protocol?
oh yeah. I mean,
3 day, 5 day, 10 day? You supervise that? What's that look like?
depending on people's weights, people love to jump into water fasting and they weigh 100 pounds. I don't advise that. But if patients are at an appropriate weight, I normally, if you can, do like 3 to 5 day water fast once a month. That would be great, especially in the presence of cancer. Otherwise, doing some people, I have a patient that doesn't really want to change a whole lot of his lifestyle, but he chooses to do a 21-day water fast every 3 months. And his tumors are shrinking and they've maintained, and he does a really good job and whatever, and I can't really argue with him. He does antiparasitics in the combination with it, he does IVs with it, but you see people do that. And so if not everybody can do that, but he has the weight to do it, and so that's been his like modality of just encouraging fasting and shrinking tumors that way. But fasting can do really great things for the body as long as your body's healthy enough to do it and has the nutrient stores to do it. But 3 to 5 day water fasts I recommend. Otherwise, if you're doing longer than that, you can do it every other month, or if you're doing it for more health purposes, I say, quarterly at least, doing like a 3 to 5 day water fast can be really beneficial because it's going to detox you. It pushes out toxins, chemicals, kills off bacteria, helps with killing off parasites, obviously. Drinking lots of water during it can be really helpful just to flush, especially if you have known toxic exposures, especially in like recent history, because then you dump out everything.
Any clients of yours doing urine therapy?
Urine
Urine
therapy?
therapy?
No, I've
Dr.
heard of
Group,
it. I
Dr.
don't do
Group's
it.
done it. I've looked at it.
I don't know if
My
I'm that
friend's
brave.
done it.
I don't
haven't
know
done
if I'm that brave to do that or recommend anyone to do it.
Yeah, no, I've over the years I've had several people come to me and say, "Yeah, this is great." Blah, blah, blah. I don't know if I could do that. I don't do. I don't know. What about
I
a dry fast? Have you heard of that?
Yeah, this has actually been a conversation of the week because I had a
Oh,
couple patients ask me about it. I've not had anybody do it. I've now kind of learning more about it in this past like week or two, just because patients have been asking me questions about it. The only thing that I worry about is that if they're toxic overloaded and then you do a dry fast, how that's going to go. And
yes.
so
Yeah. This
maybe
guy's
somebody
pretty
that's like
healthy.
a seasoned vet of
Yeah.
fasting, then they want to do a dry fast, then maybe. But I could see that being more of an appropriate setting. But some of my patients that come to me that are super toxic, doing a dry fast probably wouldn't be a great idea.
And I would guess, I don't know, I've looked into it much. A guy that did it and put up a YouTube. But if you've been super dehydrated for a long time, I don't see how that would well. I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily. Like I said, I don't know enough about it, but I wouldn't, from knowing how much you need to flush out toxins, I don't know how that would make someone feel.
Have we missed anything? We've covered a lot.
We did. I don't think so. I don't
Awesome.
know. I mean,
How do people,
obviously, there's so much more things that we can talk about
I
always.
think you and I can talk for a couple of days. Do you take insurance?
No, we don't take insurance, but people that are local here, sometimes we can do like some of their simple labs through insurance, like CBC, CMPs, things like that. Sometimes I have a patient in Florida that gets reimbursement for her visits.
HSA probably.
Well, super bills, like they have reimbursements for out-of-network providers, like some insurance companies are like that. So you can kind of do things along those lines, but ultimately insurance doesn't cover what we do,
They can probably
unfortunately.
trade you for a beef or chicken.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so that's kind of where we are with all of that. But it's been a really big honor because I've worked with some of the best in the field around the country and seeing some of these patients and watching how they even just become a light in their own state and go on to be health advocates and things along those lines that really change people's lives. So it's been fun.
Yeah, no, I like saying and similar paths, and it's been such a pleasure to finally get together and talk to you.
Absolutely. It's been
Yeah.
great.
What? Hey, how do people get a hold of you if they're dealing with these things and they want to come see you, like our good friend Miss Kathy here in Boise did? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I have patients from all over the country that, they can fly in, and my clinic's name is Rama Health, and I'm out of Minnetonka, Minnesota. But they can contact me through through the website, which is just ramahealth.com, and then that's an avenue. Also, I'm a part of First Nation Medical, which is an organization that helps patients have more autonomy with who they choose in terms of a provider. So if they're a member of it, then they can see me as a provider. Obviously, none of it goes through insurance or anything along those lines, but then they can be in other states and have the ability to be seen in some regard. And so that's another opportunity or option if you're not local to Minnesota. I appreciate taking the time to talk with us or talk with me and do all of this.
Yeah. So guys, we'll post all this stuff in the show notes on the podcast Told by Detox Show if you're listening to radio. And until next week, my friends, David DeHaas from Living Waters Wellness Center, where miracles begin by healing from within. Have a blessed week, my friend.